live from the drama-free true crime destination. It's the time where every story finds its edge, every opinion lands with weight, and every moment leads here. This is the final word. Welcome to Bethea'S Byte Reloaded, the final. Like I said, the promotion in the promo post on the community page, we've got a crazy Friday lineup today. We've got not one but two Amber Alerts to kick things off. We have a developing story in the baby Emmanuel case. Donna Adelson's trial has started, and also going on, Lyle Menendez's parole hearing is underway as well. So this is the way I really want to break all of this down for you. We start with not with speculation but with certainty. Two brothers out of California, Derek and Jaden Hernandez, were abducted from their foster home in Los Angeles. This isn't a case of just wandering off. This is a deliberate act, and the clock is ticking. The clock is also ticking in San Antonio, Texas, where a 3-year-old girl was abducted by her non-custodial mother. These are not just Amber Alerts, but it's a call to action, and I will tell you what you need to do in just a little bit. From these abductions in San Antonio, we go to the parole hearing in San Diego, where Lyle Menendez is gonna find out his fate after his brother Eric was denied parole on his. And in Tallahassee, Donna Adelson, as I just mentioned, she is standing trial. Today is day one for her. She is standing trial in the murder trial in the death of her ex-son-in-law, former FSU professor Dan Markell. These stories are not just headlines, they're heartlines. They pulse with pain, with hope, and with the demand for justice. This is the final word, and we begin with the truth. Justice isn't passive, it's pursued. Welcome one, welcome all. Let's get down to business with this Amber Alert. Take a look at your screen right now. You're looking at 2-year-old Derek Rodriguez. Give me 1 second. There we go. Derek Rodriguez is 2 years old. He stands 2 feet tall, weighs 20 pounds, last seen wearing a dark t-shirt and dark pants. His brother, Jaden Hernandez, is 10 years of age, stands 4 feet tall, weighs 100 pounds, wearing a black shirt and black pants. They were last seen with possible suspect, the non-custodial mother, Jacqueline Hernandez Torres. She's 30 years of age, stands 5 feet tall, weighs around 120 pounds, last seen wearing a light-colored hoodie with dark pants, sweatpants. She was last seen driving a black 2008 Chrysler PT Cruiser with Indiana license plates DFT 105. Again, that's Indiana license plate DFT 105, a black 2008 Chrysler PT Cruiser. Now, here's what I need you to do. If you suspect anything, if you see anything, you are asked to call 911 immediately. If not, then get a hold of the Los Angeles Police Department. That's area code 213-382-9102. 213-382-9102. But as always, no matter no matter how what the situation is. Please, if you see something, say something. That way, we can do something to bring these two young men back home safe and sound. Now we're gonna move on. We're about to go to our second Amber Alert of the day. And this is coming out of San Antonio, Texas. Look at your screen. This is 3-year-old Aurora Bojorquez, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. She stands 2 feet 5 inches tall, weighs about 30 pounds, with brown hair, brown eyes. She may be in the custody of her non-custodial mother, Amber Hevelin, 38 years of age, standing 5 feet 2, weighs around 130 pounds, with brown hair, blue eyes. Last seen driving a white 2013 Dodge Caravan with Texas license plate WFB 8035. Again, that license plate is Texas license plate WFB 8035. Now I come to you again. If you see anything regarding the disappearance of Aurora Bojorquez, you're asked to call 911 immediately. You're also asked to call the Bexar County, Texas Sheriff's Department at 210-335-6000. 210-335-6000, or you can email your tips to missingpersons@bear.org. missingpersons@bear.org. Ladies and gentlemen, time is not on the side of this little girl. Let's do what we can. If you see something, please say something. That way we can do something. We can bring little Aurora home, and we can bring Amber Hevelin to justice. Let's do everything we can, and let's bring this young lady home. All right? All right. Now, let's get to now let's get some meat here. All right. First of all, my laptop is running slow, so I apologize for that. But we're gonna coast on, and we got a number of things to get to. First off, we've got some breaking news to share with you this morning. The parents of missing baby Emmanuel Harrow has been arrested and charged with his murder. We're out of Amazon, California. The parents of missing of 7-month-old Emmanuel Harrow have been arrested days after they initially reported the baby missing under suspicious circumstances. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office announced the arrests of Jake and Rebecca Harrow on murder charges this morning, Friday morning. The couple was arrested at their home in Cabazon. Deputies who announced the arrest said their search for Emmanuel is continuing. A vehicle belonging to Jake was seized by investigators on Tuesday, according to KABC. Emmanuel was first reported missing on August 14th after his mother said she was attacked outside of a Big Five sporting goods store. Rebecca told officers that a man approached her while she was changing Emmanuel's diaper and knocked her unconscious. But inconsistencies led deputies to say they could not rule out foul play in this case. This is a developing story, and when I get more information, I will be sure to bring it here to you. But as of right now, Jake and Rebecca Harrow, the parents of baby Emmanuel, are arrested and charged with his murder. And keep this in mind. This has been done before. This is a what we call a no body case. Now there's a little light on the subject. This is a no body case, which means One, they haven't recovered a body. Two, as I mentioned, Emmanuel is still missing. And if we so if you have any information on Emmanuel Haro, please call local authorities or call 911 immediately. But I cannot stress this part enough. I can't. If you see something, please say something. That way we can do something. We can do everything we can to bring Emmanuel Haro back home safe and sound. All right. Let's see what we got. What else I got going here? Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot I wanna cover. Let's back. Oh, like right. Oh, like this. A Florida nurse is taking a plea deal in a sexual battery case involving her stepson. A Florida nurse is accused of raping her stepson, and she's accepted a plea deal that will significantly reduce her potential sentence. On Thursday, yesterday, 34-year-old Alexis Von Yates pleaded no contest to a lesser charge of lewd and lascivious battery in an Ocala courtroom. She was originally charged with sexual battery on a person 12 to 18 years of age by a person in familial custody. Prosecutors said the victim's family supported the negotiated plea to avoid requiring the 15-year-old victim to return to Florida to testify, which they feared would disrupt his ongoing mental health treatment. The case stems from July 2024 allegations that Von Yates sexually assaulted her stepson while he was visiting his father. Court documents indicate the father discovered the assault and confronted Von Yates. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Von Yates will serve 2 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by 2 years of community control and 10 years of sex offender probation. She must also complete 200 hours of community service and pay fines and court costs. The judge noted the agreement represented a significant downward departure from standard sentencing guidelines, but ultimately accepted the plea after a brief recess. The official scheduling is scheduled for September 16th at 8 a.m., when the victim and his biological mother plan to make statements to a court. Von Yates' nursing license was suspended following her November 6, 2024 arrest. So now that we know that, we I don't know what justice looks like in that case, but not totally sure if that was it. All right, let's move forward. We've got court documents show an Idaho man confessed to killing daughter. He's I'm quoting, "I did it, dude." Idaho man charged with killing his daughter in their home on Monday allegedly confessed to police during an interview. Delbert Cornish was arrested in his mountain home on Monday, transferred to Canyon County custody on Tuesday, and was arraigned in Canyon County Court on Wednesday afternoon, where he was appointed a public defender. He is currently being held without bail. So let me recap all that before I continue the article. Monday, he was arrested. Tuesday, he was transferred to Canyon County custody. Wednesday, he was arraigned in Canyon County Court. He's and appointed a public defender and still being held without bail. Court documents obtained by Scripps News Boise reveal many details about the case, including an alleged confession. The records say Cornish told the detective, quote, "I'm not gonna lie, I did it, dude," end quote. A probable cause affidavit explains Cornish previously planned to kill all of his children and then himself. Documents say Cornish began to cry while being questioned and told officers he was an alcoholic who struggles with depression. During the interview, Cornish said he bought a gun last fall and came up with the idea to kill all 3 of his children and then himself, But the plan was ruined a few months ago when his oldest son violated parole and was sent back to prison. Cornish lived with his brother and two of his children in the Caldwell home where the murder took place, just a few blocks from the Canyon County Jail. The Canyon County coroner identified the 18-year-old victim Tuesday as Hope Cornish. Family members say she went by Onyx and Cornish adopted her many years ago. Court documents show Cornish told detectives he lost his job 2 weeks ago but was keeping it a secret from his brother and felt he couldn't hide it much longer. When he woke up on Monday, he told his brother today was the day, but did not tell him what that meant. He walked officers through his day, including how he contemplated when and how to kill Onyx. While he stood outside her bedroom door trying to decide what to do, she happened to open the door. He told officers he shot her in the head, then stood there for 20 minutes watching her gasp for breath. Cornish began to cry out loud and told the detective, "I'm a piece of meat, man. I'm not going to lie. I did it." Court documents say that after killing Onyx, Cornish covered her body with a pride flag as a way to honor her, and then shot and killed her cat. He then went into a fit of rage, punched holes in the wall around the house, and swung a hatchet into Onyx's bedroom door. He then wrote a confession and suicide note, drank bourbon and watched TV until his son came home from school. When Cornish's son got home, he told the teen he had killed his sister and tried to convince him to check on her. Documents say Cornish then shot the floor, pointed the gun at his son while blocking him from leaving the house. The son was ultimately able to disarm his dad, leave the house, and call 911. Cornish then drove to his ex-girlfriend's house in Mountain Home, where he was taken into custody Monday night. Cornish will be back in court for a preliminary hearing on September 3rd. Cornish is a type of guy that is in a bad way, but what he did is not excusable. This is murder. This is something you do not. This is something you don't do, especially when it comes down to someone you supposedly love and care about. More details as they come with his arraignment and everything, and I'll be sure to bring it here. Bethea'S Byte Reloading. Let's see what else. What else are we? Did we get to get in here? Oh, here's one. This is update on the Austin Drummer case. He says he's innocent in a behind bars telephone call. All right, I'll give you a good portion of this article. Then we're gonna go to Vinnie Politan and closing arguments for a breakdown in this case. The man accused of killing 4 people and abandoning an infant in West Tennessee is speaking out publicly and claims he's innocent. Austin Drummond was arrested earlier this month in Jackson, Tennessee, about 75 miles from Lake County, where the murders occurred. Authorities discovered 4 members of the same family murdered in Lake County on July 29th. Adriana Williams, James Matthew Wilson, Courtney Rose, and teenager Braden Williams. That same day, an infant related to the victims was found abandoned but safe in a car seat in a stranger's front yard in Dyer County. According to investigators, Drummond knew the victims. He was dating Rose's sister. So now that we know that, I am going to bring this up on screen. I am going to take myself off the screen, and you're gonna hear from Vinnie Politan and closing arguments. This further coverage on Austin Drummond's case.
We're here today today to confirm that Austin Drummond has been taken into custody. More importantly, his capture occurred without any further harm to the public or to any law enforcement officers. Just after 8 o'clock a.m., we received multiple calls of sightings of the suspect. Placing resources there immediately resulted in an additional citizen's call at about 8:57 a.m. We took advantage of that quickly evolving situation and made the arrest at 9:05 a.m.
This was a scary moment in Tennessee, a scary bunch of days when this killer was literally on the loose. There was surveillance video of him with a gun, you know, seeing if doors are locked, unlocked, looking for places to stay as he was hiding from police. He was captured. He's accused of mass murder, 4 people. There were 5 people there. There was also a baby at the house. The baby he took from the house, didn't leave with the dead bodies, but he is accused of murdering the baby's parents, 20 and 21 years old, the baby's uncle, 15 years old, the baby's grandmother, 38 years old, but took the baby from the scene and left it with a stranger on the yard, honking the horn, making sure that someone took care of the baby. And that sped up his arrest and his identification by saving the baby. Well, now he is speaking for the very first time from behind bars with Nick Barris, one of the great reporters from Scripps News Group up in Tennessee. Take a listen to what Austin Drummond had to say.
Austin Drummond is locked up without bond in the Obion County Jail. He's charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. A source gave him my cell phone number, and he called us to talk about his case.
I'm innocent of what I'm charged with, yes, sir. I'm not an innocent man, but I'm not guilty of what they charged me with.
Of course, you would expect a man potentially facing the death penalty to say that.
I offered to take a polygraph.
The 28-year-old Drummond admits to a long criminal record dating back to his teenage years and was a one-time member of the Vice Lords gang. But he says he did not kill Adriana Williams, Braden Williams, Matthew James Wilson, or Courtney Rose, whose bodies were all found in Lake County on July 29th.
I had no reason to hurt these people. They were my girlfriend's family who became my family. I took Adriana to the hospital to have her baby. I helped teach Braden to drive. Matthew was like a little brother to me, man.
Drummond was on the run for several days after the murders. Locals in Northwest Tennessee feared a killer was on the loose, and it made national headlines. If Drummond didn't murder the 4 victims, then why did he run?
I did not handle the situation right by running, but I was afraid.
And here's why. Drummond says after another arrest earlier this year, he cut a deal with the Lake County District Attorney, FBI, and ATF to work as a confidential informant.
During my time working for them, I helped uncover drug dealers selling multiple kilos at a time of cocaine, also drug traffickers delivering pounds of meth. We identified dirty law enforcement and correctional personnel and tapped Vice Lord leadership phones.
Drummond says he learned that his cover had been blown the day of the killings, and that is why he ran.
I was afraid because I knew bad things happened, and I was afraid that because I was an informant, things would go wrong. Things would happen to me.
We did ask the district attorney about Drummond's claim that he was working as a confidential informant. The DA said he could not comment at this time. We should learn much more about the case against Drummond at a preliminary hearing that's scheduled for early September. Nick Barris, News Channel 5.
Unbelievable work by Nick Barris, by the way. Let's bring back in our think tank. Randy Kessler, Erica Wilson, Josh Schiffer. This just got much more complicated. I was not expecting that.
Nope, makes it smooth, because guess what? That guy's story, 100% tracks. 100%. They put the squeeze on him as an undercover, means you go out there and jump into a pool you are not prepared to swim in. He gets mixed up with some real bad dudes that have no qualms killing your girlfriend and her family and all these other people.
Well, the girlfriend wasn't killed. It was the girlfriend's sister.
Girlfriend, anybody, doesn't matter.
So what led investigators to him?
Oh, well, they had his name just from doing the profiles of everybody involved, and, you know, they can build these charts pretty quickly.
They had a picture of a car.
They
had a picture of a car. They've arrested 3 other people who are alleged to have helped him after the fact.
Right. You know what's interesting is you always say zip it, right? Don't talk. You're on death row. Zip it, zip it, zip it. Well, in this case, it can't get much worse for you, right? Everyone thinks you did it. Unzip it and talk.
So why would those people save the baby? If someone else did this, why would they save the... I understand why he would save the baby. He just told me that he was there for the birth of that child.
I think he did save the baby, and I think
So you think he's there during this mass murder?
I think that he was present. I think that he asked other people to help him because he got in so deep that there were 4 bodies.
But Vinny's saying if it wasn't him, why did the people that killed everybody else not kill the baby?
And why wouldn't they kill him? Like, I don't understand. I'm not following the bouncing ball from Josh Schiffer. Is anyone following Josh right now?
That's because
I'm buying half of it, Josh.
Yeah,
I'm
but I'm not following what he's...
That's reasonable doubt.
Even a killer could say, okay, that's one too many, right? I mean, sooner or later, okay.
Okay, well, let's
Grandma.
start first with who is responsible. You are saying his story tracks. Does that mean someone else is responsible?
I believe someone else could be responsible.
Are you a defense lawyer?
I know.
So if someone else could be responsible, why is the baby alive?
Because they weren't going to be, they're cold, callous, horrible killers, but killing a baby's a little bit of a step
But it's
too
not,
far.
it wouldn't be killing the baby, it would be letting the baby die.
You know what evidence
which
there
is different.
The only evidence there is him saving a baby.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only direct
According
evidence.
to Josh's theory, he fought off the killers and saved the baby and also saved himself.
Well,
right?
I'm not saying he necessarily had to fight. He was involved with some bad people, might have double dealt.
Is
I don't
there
know.
any way he
dirty
could have
cops,
been
dirty
there
prosecutors.
at the time?
Absolutely. I
So
think
he could have saved the baby but not been responsible for the murders?
I think that he could have been
Why not just
present.
name the
It doesn't-
murderers?
That's it. It doesn't track, Josh, because if he's going to talk, you say, not only did I not do it, here's who did do it.
Oh,
go get him.
I think that that's where he's being smart, because guess what? He's been through the system enough times that he knows when to talk and when not to. And he just did drop a dime on some people and saved himself from a death penalty case by talking about these third parties.
There was no deal yet.
Oh,
that was just a reporter. That wasn't the
absolutely.
That wasn't the
But I'm just telling you, that's how you get the death penalty off the table, is by going out there and stopping the ability.
Vinny Politan and saying, I want to tell you my story. You call the prosecutor.
That guy's not going to call a prosecutor. Prosecutor can't help him nearly as much as the court of public opinion can.
Well, Vinny,
and this guy's scared.
Do they have your cell phone number? Because
They do not have my
I've
cell
got
phone.
it.
wanna give it up?
We
we
could-
can give it out. He can call you.
We've got Nick Barris working for Scripps News Group, so we're in good hands. So what do you think's going to happen next now? There's going to be this preliminary hearing. Do you think any part of the defense is raised at the preliminary hearing, or are we just going to hear about the forensic evidence or whatever else they have, whether it's video that ties this defendant? Will there be anything about the defense at this prelim?
He's not getting off the hook. It's going to keep going. Why would he say anything?
But will we even hear about it?
He's not going to get bond anyway because it's a murder case, so he's not going to say anything. It's a fishing expedition for the defense to get whatever they can get to prepare. The real thing that's going to help is later on, if there's documents or showing participation with undercover officers, these dirty cops that he's talking, who knows where that goes? We've seen some cases recently where law enforcement has done things that shocks the conscience. That stuff happens. We're just beating up on this guy because he was the unsophisticated lower class individual who looks like he would be the killer.
If he's turning state's evidence, if he's going to turn somebody else in and throw somebody else under the bus, you do it. You get it.
You don't do it when they're going to kill you right now.
We shall
but
see.
that's a while
Great
ago.
job tonight, Randy Kessler, Erica Wilson, Josh Schiffer. Great to see you.
I'm still trying to make heads and tails out of this. If he's going to claim innocence, say somebody else did it, why call up a news reporter? Why call a news reporter? Tell somebody else that's not related to the court of public opinion. And need I remind Mr. Drummond that it's your life on the line. Telling a news reporter is not going to help your case inside that courtroom. Right now, call me a member of that court of public opinion. What I am not, although as you can see, I am wearing black. But this is not a judge's robe. My hands are clear. There's no gavel in it. Therefore, I'm not the one that's going to be able to sentence you to life in prison or adjudicate you acquitted if you are found not guilty of 4 murders. I don't have that power. Neither do the rest of us. All we have is platforms like this and the mouths that the good Lord has given us. So telling us what you did is not going to help you. You need to talk to police. You need to talk to your attorney. You need to talk to the prosecuting attorney. Tell them what's going on. Tell them you're innocent. If you have to go to court, tell that 12-person jury and that judge that's sitting on the bench that you are not guilty, that you're innocent in all this. Otherwise, just like it says in First Corinthians 13, you may speak of you may have the voice, but all you're doing is just making noise. A judge has severed the cases of a mother and son accused of murder. This is interesting. Alright, this is out of Provo, Utah. A Utah judge has officially severed the cases of Kevin Ellis from his mother, ruling that he'll stand trial first. During a brief hearing in Provo on Wednesday, Judge Roger W. Griffin approved the motion to split Ellis' case from his mother, Tracy Grist, before announcing that Ellis' trial will go down first. This development follows Catherine Restelli's guilty plea earlier this summer. Ellis' sister and the victim's wife pleaded guilty to 3 charges in the July 2024 death of Matthew Restelli: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and discharge of a firearm. Catherine Restelli will be sentenced on September 9. Ellis faces multiple charges, including murder and possession of a controlled substance, for allegedly shooting Matthew Restelli 7 times at their family home on July 12, 2024. Ellis has claimed he acted in self-defense to protect himself, his sister, and his mother, all of whom were in the house at the time of the shooting. Defense attorney Scott Williams requested another update hearing in 6 to 8 weeks, citing the need to determine trial scheduling between Ellis and his mother, as well as a time to secure expert witnesses. Judge Griffin scheduled the next hearing for October 15th. Digital evidence previously presented in court suggests a plot involving Catherine and Grist. Text messages and search histories indicate discussions about Catherine's desire to leave her marriage and plans to lure Matthew to Utah. Investigators found an audio recording on Grist's phone of Catherine speaking to a divorce attorney, asking how she could legally refuse to take her children back to California and leave their father. She maintained she was suffering verbal abuse, but said Matthew had never physically hurt her or the children. The attorney for Grist also appeared at Wednesday's hearing and confirmed Grist's attendance at the October hearing. Now, a lot of this makes no sense, maybe as far as the claims go. As far as the claims go, a lot of it doesn't make any sense, guys. I mean, if Catherine wanted to divorce Matthew, okay, talking to the divorce attorney, that part makes sense. Talk to the divorce attorney. He drafts up the paperwork. You sign it. Your soon-to-be ex signs it. That gets turned in. It's filed in court. Boom, you're done. But apparently, some people have to take it further than that. Like the case we got going on right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit. According to police, the victim texted the sister, "If I die, it was Greg," before disappearing. A judge granted prosecutor's request to hold a Massachusetts man accused of killing his pregnant girlfriend without bond. 22-year-old Gregory Groom was arrested on Tuesday evening after human remains consistent with those of 18-year-old Kylie Monteiro were found in his home, according to Bristol County District Attorney Tom Quinn. He's facing several charges, including murder and assault and battery on a pregnant person. Monteiro, who was 11 weeks pregnant, was reported missing on October 7th by Groom, and according to prosecutors saying this in court. Groom allegedly told police that Monteiro had left his home after an argument, and the two had a troubled relationship, and Groom was previously facing assault and battery charges for an incident that had occurred days prior. In a criminal complaint reviewed by Court TV, investigators said they learned from Monteiro's sister that they had sent a text on the evening of August 6th, saying, quote, "He threw me on the ground and pulled my hair and strangled me. My phone's at 4%. If I die, it was Greg," end quote. Groom offered several explanations to investigators before he allegedly admitted to stabbing Monteiro. At Wednesday's hearing, prosecutors said Groom confessed to stabbing Monteiro once in the head and twice in the chest with such force that the knife broke. Groom drew a map leading officers to her remains. Human remains were found buried 5 feet underground in the location where Groom had indicated. Groom is back in court on September 10 for a probable cause hearing. Now this is what always strikes me. All these different problems. If you got an issue with your significant other, and it gets down to the point where you're ready to kill somebody, your best bet is 1, not do it, and 2, let them go. You leave, or let that ex leave. That saves a lot of trouble from you becoming a defendant, a murder defendant. All right. Quick verdict watch update. Hernandez Govan was acquitted in the murder of rapper Young Dolph. Whoa. This case just went down. Oh, in fact, let's go right to the courtroom so we can hear the entire verdict in its entirety.
All right, let's head to Tennessee here. We've been streaming this trial. This is the Hernandez Govan trial, accused of being the mastermind in the death of rapper Young Dolph, a Illinois, Chicago-based rapper who was killed in 2021 in a hail of gunfire. A jury has come to a decision in this case. Let's go in and see what the verdict is.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you reached a verdict?
Yes.
State of Tennessee versus Hernandez Govan, count 1. We, the jury, found the defendant Hernandez Govan not guilty in count 1 of the indictment. State of Tennessee versus Hernandez Govan, count 2. We, the jury, found the defendant Hernandez Govan not guilty in count 2 of the indictment. Ma'am?
Court's in session.
Ma'am? Ms. Johnson, is this your verdict? Is this your verdict? Yes, sir. Is this your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is this your verdict? Yes. Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict? Is this your verdict? Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I want to thank you for your service this week. You've done exactly what the court asked you to do, which was to sit, listen to all the proof, and come to a decision. You are excused.
The jury is excused. Thank you.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, y'all. Court still in session.
Mr. Hernandez Govan, a jury of your peers having found.
Okay, there you have it. Not guilty. Hernandez Govan, alleged mastermind in the murder of Young Dolph, a rapper who was in Memphis, Tennessee at a cookie shop. And was gunned down in a hail of gunfire back in November of 2021. His defense in the closing argument told the jury that the district attorney in this case should be embarrassed for even bringing this case to them. And it appears as though, as you see this celebration continue inside the courtroom, that the jury went along with that defense argument, coming back with not guilties on both of the top two charges. Mr. Govan will be going home as he thumps his chest at his family in the background, presumably, or supporters. You can see that huge relief from everyone on the defense team, including the defendant. Madeline Somerville is with us, and there's nothing like a verdict. There's so much on the line. People's freedom, and in this case, it worked out well for the defendant, and the jury just didn't believe that the state had the case. And the judge said it. You did what you're supposed to do. You came here and you listened and decided. And that's the system.
Yeah, that's the system, and sometimes things work out the way that they should. And I, as a jury consultant, think that they do most of the time work out the way they should. I think whenever there's a conspiracy in any case, it's extremely difficult to prove motive, because you can say this person didn't like, you know, the decedent, they had a contentious relationship with him, but that doesn't mean that they killed him. And I think you and I have talked about this before, where we said, you know, they're not allowed to say in closing argument, think about what you would do in this situation, but all the jurors all do anyways. And I think in this situation, they thought, well, if I were in this man's shoes, there's no way that I would think that it was fair to convict me. So I think the right outcome happened here today.
Yeah, well, it was reasonable doubt, and this case was going to be difficult from the very beginning. A conspiracy case always is, because it isn't, this guy shot it, here's the fingerprints, here's the cell phone data, here's the video of it. Here, you know, some of these cases that we watch are overwhelming in terms of proof. This seemed to be riddled with reasonable doubt. And I have no doubt that the prosecution came here on good faith, thinking that this man absolutely was the mastermind behind this murder. But sometimes when you don't have it and you roll the dice, you lose.
Well, you know, there's a line that one of the attorneys said in closing arguments that I've actually heard my colleagues use before that's very effective, which was, you know, this attorney thinks you're stupid. They think you're stupid. And it's very effective because people's ears perk up, first of all, when you hear the word stupid. And it's almost like you're on defense and you start thinking, okay, maybe I need to reconsider whatever that was. Your attention just zooms in really quick and you start thinking about whatever it is that's being delivered to you next. So it was a very effective way of communicating.
Yeah, we've seen versions of that a lot. Defense attorneys, good attorneys use it. Don't be fooled. They're trying to, and you're the last chance. It's up to you to hold up. It's a great country of ours, reasonable doubt, and there is. All right, let's switch gear. There you see, they're still celebrating. There's the obligatory selfie. Will be on the law firm website by the lunch hour, I'm sure, and the celebration continues before this man, Hernandez Govan, found not guilty in the murder of rapper Young Dolph in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yep, you heard it right. Right, not guilty of murder and not guilty of attempted murder. Hernandez Govan, 45 years of age, will now go free. Govan hugged his lawyer and thanked Shelby County Judge Jennifer Mitchell after she told him he was free to go. He was accused of shooting young Dolph, but prosecutors claimed he directed the two people who did. The jury was not convinced. However, despite a man's testimony that Govan hired him to do the hits and was going to take $10,000 as his cut. Govan's lawyer questioned the quality of the police investigation and the validity of cell phone communications between Govan and the men who shot Dolph, arguing that nothing in the communications directly incriminated Govan or tied him to the killings. So that's a wrap for that particular case. Hernandez Govan is now free, and I guess the investigation, the murder of young Dolph, will continue. A former attorney is being charged with strangling his girlfriend to death. Looks like we're staying in Tennessee with this one. Well, take a look at the left side of your screen. A Nashville man with a history of domestic violence accusations has been charged with murder after an autopsy confirmed his girlfriend died from strangulation. Jared Strake, age 40, is facing murder charges in the death of 46-year-old Miranda Gray, who was found dead in her apartment on Monday. Strake called 911 at 9:30 a.m. Monday requesting an ambulance, claiming Gray was unresponsive. When officers arrived, they found Gray deceased. When asked how long she had been unresponsive, Strake declined to answer, according to a news release. Tuesday's autopsy reviewed Gray had numerous injuries and died from strangulation. Homicide detectives noted Strake was violating bond conditions from a February aggravated assault arrest where he allegedly threatened Gray with a knife. As part of his bond conditions, Strake was prohibited from visiting Gray's apartment. Police arrested Strake Monday night on the bond violation charge while the death investigation continued. A judicial commissioner set his bond at $75,000 for that charge. Court records showed Hermitage precinct officers had arrested Strake multiple times this year on domestic violence related charges. In addition to the February case, which was indicted by a grand jury as domestic assault with an October court date, he was arrested on April 29th on charges of aggravated assault and violating bond conditions. Gray had reported that Strake had pushed her hand into a closet door and shut a patio door on her arm. Records show those charges were dropped May 1st. On July 26th, Strake was arrested again on charges of aggravated assault and violating bond conditions after Gray reported he had cut her wrist with a knife inside the apartment on July 20th. His bond was set at $85,000, but records show the charges were dropped August 1st. 2 days later, on August 3rd, Strake was arrested for violating bond conditions again after officers responded to a domestic disturbance at the apartment and found him there. His bond for that arrest was set at just $2,500. In the February case, Gray allegedly told a domestic violence detective that she was talking with the district attorney's office about prosecution and planned to follow up at the Family Safety Center for an order of protection and counseling. However, in subsequent police responses, Gray declined counseling, an order of protection, prosecution, and shelter services, according to police. Strake had worked as an attorney until his license was suspended earlier this year after complaints unrelated to criminal activity were filed against him, according to the Tennessean. Now, as long as this guy is out and walking the streets, ladies, be careful. This guy is dangerous. That's all that can be said. He may be behind bars right now, but if they let him free on bond, be careful. Be real careful. That's all I got to say on that. Right now we got a little bit of breaking news. it's kind of sorta. What I'm gonna do as an exclusive is to give you the closing arguments in the killer's daughter murder trial, starting with the prosecution. This is Vincent Bossett representing the state in the case against Christopher Wolfenbarger.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to allow the parties, the state specifically, to make its closing argument.
Thank you. So what's being depicted now is one of the first exhibits that we introduced. That is a photograph of Melissa John Wolfenbarger. And that's a photograph that was taken somewhere around 1997, a year before Melissa went missing. In 1998. We know that in 1998 she was 21 years of age. So she's roughly about 20 years old at that point. And even though she hadn't gotten a chance to live a very long life, she was a mother at that point. She was a wife. And what I look at when I see that photograph, I see a smile, but I also see hope. I see hope when I look at that photograph because of what she must have thought about her children, what she hoped for them, the life that she hoped to live. And I think about the 27 years that has passed and how long that is to wait for justice. But that 27 years, that's a long time to experience life. That's a long time to fall down and get up. And fall down and get up. That's time to experience and have memories with your children. Children that don't have a memory of Melissa. Not Joseph, not Christina. That's an opportunity to have and create memories with your grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren that you heard Christina testify. She's got 3 boys. There's opportunities. That's what was missing. That's what has been missed. That is what has been taken away from Melissa. The opportunity to have a life, to have those experiences. And she deserved that, even if she didn't want to spend it with this defendant. Even if she wanted to leave him, she still deserved to have that opportunity. She was manipulated. She was intimidated. She was abused. And she was coerced to give up her children. I believe that's what the evidence shows. I can tell you, 27 years later, I would not expect a judge to allow a defendant that married his wife to be alone with them, to speak to them 6 days after it happened. Roughly 5 or 6 days after they went down to apply for a protective order. 5 to 6 days after the order, and had no contract was in place, the judge lets her speak alone with him. And then on that very same day, I wanted to speak. On that very same day, children go back with mom. And we don't know what was said. We don't know what was said. We don't know what he said to them. We don't even know if the bruises that were on her from his attack on July 21st, 1990, we don't even know if those had fully healed. I can assure you the mental and emotional trauma from that act, having to call the police. After a period of time in July, we know she had already been abused and experienced abuse. So when we think about domestic violence and we think about being intimidated, coerced, that's what I want you to think about when we look back at that date, July 29th. I believe the evidence shows that she was intimidated. She wasn't able to be influenced, especially after being beaten for a year by this defendant. And I don't believe that she ever intended to give up her children and walk away from her family, her children. Your Honor.
object to the council's repeated use of "I believe," "I can assure you." Council is not supposed to interject personal opinion.
Understood. Mr. Fawcett has offered to rephrase. Go ahead.
Now, the indictment you'll get will have one count of murder, really malice, murder, the intent to kill, the intention to kill Melissa Walker. And this is why we're here. From what was found on April 29th, 1999, and June 3rd, 1999. Goal of Melissa Walker Barter, his job, communities within that same vicinity in the wooded area. In a minute from the residence where Christopher Walker Barter and Melissa Walker Barter live. And your judge is going to instruct you that you are duty bound to follow the law, and in your consideration of the law, you should consider certain things and certain things you should not consider, such as sympathy for either the victim in this case or the defendant, disagreement with the law, conjecture, dislike of the system, television, public opinion, penalty or punishment. The only thing that you are to decide when you're considering the evidence is whether or not the state has met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt and prove the guilt or innocence of the guilt of this defendant. You should consider the elements of the crime, the law which the judge will give you. Your oath that you taken as jurors backs the case as presented in the form of testimony, video exhibits such as the video of the defendant hiding, audio exhibits such as the audio of the defendant stating that you never looked for her, acknowledging that he took assault, also acknowledging that she was dating someone and seeing someone and staying with someone named Mike. She also considered the credibility of the witnesses. What was it like when they were testifying? How did they answer the questions? You are entitled and you're the determinant of the credibility of not just the state's witnesses, but also the witnesses that the defendant called. Consider what the defense is. Now, the defendant doesn't have to present any defense. Walk into court Tuesday, Wednesday, say, hey, make him prove it. But that's not what happened in this case. The defense in this case is Carl Patton. Listen to the theory, open statement. The defense in this case is Carl Patton, killed Melissa Walker. Other than the fact that evidence came in that Carl Patton committed murders, what other piece of evidence or fact, anything that you've heard during the course of this week, what points to that? What other fact would allow you to create that evidence? Other than the fact that he killed someone, the evidence came in, Melissa didn't even know about it. The only thing that's come in about the relationship between the Pattons and their children is that they appear to love each other. It's not based off the letter, list of cards that she wrote, time that she wanted to take her father, Carl, and her mother, Norma, out to lunch. Those are going to be back in the room with you for you to observe and look at while you deliberate. This case is just simply not about Carl Patton as much as they think. This case is about domestic violence. This case is about intimidation. This case is about loss of control. Loss of control that this defendant had over the custody of his children and over Melissa. No matter how much they want this case to be about Carl Patton, this case has nothing to do with Carl Patton, other than the fact that he asked law enforcement to find his daughter. Why does Norma go to the residence of Kathy Walkenbarger looking for Melissa, raising attention to that issue if they're responsible for it? Now, a lot of facts that come into evidence in this case I would ask you to put back weight on more facts that have been corroborated, like that. You heard that from Norma. You don't have to just take Norma's word for it because you heard that from Christina. She does not have a lot of memory from her childhood. She doesn't have a memory of her mother, but she remembers that day. Because that stood out. Where's my daughter? I could just imagine how that was. It wasn't a calm statement. It was screaming, where's my daughter? Norma probably showed up to that residence of Kathy in a panic. Where's my daughter? That's something that Christina would remember. And that's why you should believe that happened. And that's why that theory is just plain ridiculous. He killed on the squad car. Most importantly, your common sense is the main thing that Brad needs to use in the side of this case. What does the evidence tell you? What do the facts tell you? What has been presented? Judge is also going to charge you on what reasonable doubt is and what it is. They're going to charge you that the state is not required to prove the doubt or the guilt of the defendant beyond all doubt for mathematical certainty. Reasonable doubt is a doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror, honestly seeking the truth. Is a doubt based on common sense and reason. It is not meaning vague or arbitrary doubt, like Carl Patton. They arbitrary, not supported by the facts. Thrown out. Hoping to stick on the wall. Evidence may be direct or circumstantial, or both. Consider the evidence, you may use your reasoning and common sense to make deductions and reach conclusions. May be direct or circumstantial. Evidence is that which may be seen or heard. Otherwise, direct the sense. Christina says, I saw Norma show up to the residence in a panic looking for her daughter. That's direct evidence of her observations. And from that recollection, testimony of Norma, you can infer that Norma was sincere when she was looking for her daughter. The types of inferences that you can infer from the facts that have been presented. And then we have the circumstantial evidence. It was exactly what I was referring to. We get evidence of who marks up direct evidence, those observations. Evidence that the defendant was in possession of assault. And we wouldn't walk into court on Wednesday and ask you to convict because there were 2 marks on the bones and remains of Melissa Walkenbarger. And we wouldn't ask you to walk in here on Wednesday when we start presenting evidence and convict this defendant of murder because he was in possession of assault. Can you draw logical, common sense conclusions from that? That's just one piece of the evidence that has been presented, but you were able to do that. We have saw around the same time that the wife of the victim, his wife's remains were located. The medical examiner says that the saw we presented is Exhibit 66 is consistent with the type of marks that could be made by that instrument. And in his own statement that he was in possession of it around that time in the statement of the rocks, although they were reluctant to say so, that they never got that saw back. We would not ask you to convict solely based on that fact alone, but that is a fact that you can consider, and those are inferences that you can draw. Reasonable, common sense inferences. So this is what I saw when I woke up this morning. I probably see this a lot more than most people, but when I woke up, this is what I saw. And I had time, so I stopped by to get some gas. And by the time I finished, I got back and I crunked up a car, and I'm I'm back on forward. So I never saw anything going to my vehicle. But during that period, I smelled what appeared to be gas because I cut grass, I smelled gas. There's about less money in my account. The numbers on the dial are moving. I hear a clicking sound. And so, even though I never saw any gas on my vehicle, there are logical deductions and conclusions that I was drawn from all those facts and circumstances. Nobody's going to be able to come in and tell me that Santa Claus put gas in the vehicle. So when we ask you to use your common sense and look at the facts, the evidence is what it says it is. The facts are what they are. In the count of murder, you'll get the indictment. You'll see that it's charged that the defendant with malice aforethought cause it caused the death of Melissa Walker by inflicting homicidal violence. Now, as it's charged, that term homicidal violence, based on the manner in which the remains were recovered, it is impossible for the medical examiner to determine if she was shot, if she was strangled, if she was stabbed, any number of ways that you could commit a murder could have been committed to Melissa Walker. But you can't tell if someone has been strangled if their neck is missing. You can't tell if they're stabbed or shot in the torso if there's no torso. And what we're able to determine based on the testimony of the medical examiner is that the facts and circumstances what she observed as how the remains were located, the history and evidence of domestic violence in that relationship, the fact there's evidence that someone removed her limbs with salt. All of those facts, and the fact you heard her testify that in her medical opinion, her expert opinion, she did not believe that Melissa Walker died of natural causes. All those are facts that point to homicidal violence. In her opinion, was that it was more likely that Melissa Walker died from homicide. That was her opinion. And that's why the indictment is charged like that, is because of how she was found. But that does not take away from what we have proven based on the testimony. And that is that she died from being murdered. That is called homicide. Just going to charge you with the law of malice. It is not ill or hatred. It is just simply a killing without justification, excuse, or mitigation. It can be expressed, deliberate intention to unlawfully take a life of another person, and it may be implied with no considerable provocation appears in all the circumstances of the killing show and abandoned in the living part. I submit to you the facts and circumstances of this case, and all the facts and circumstances of this case point to that conclusion as the only reasonable conclusion that this defendant did in fact commit malice murder on the person of Melissa Walker. The state does not have to prove premeditation to prove murder. Regardless of how briefly that malicious intent existed, malice may be formed in an instant. And if malice was in the defendant's mind at the time of killing or act, and moved the defendant to do it, that is enough for the killing to be murder. The state does not have to prove motive to prove murder. Any evidence of motive needed for the use to determine the defendant's state of mind at the time of the killing, you are allowed to consider, such as the evidence of domestic violence is lawful evidence of motive. Did he abuse her that year? Did he hit her? Did it happen multiple times that year? That's what the facts have shown. You can use that and those facts and the expert testimony from the domestic violence experts as evidence of the defendant's motive. And all of those things I previously mentioned, the fact that it's an open criminal case that she wasn't able to appear to. The fact that she was seeing someone else the fact that she planned on leaving, that she had continually left him throughout that year. All of that is evidence of motive. The judge is also going to tell you that the testimony of the single witness, it believed, is sufficient to establish a fact. There's no legal requirement of corroboration of the witness, provided you find the evidence to be sufficient. That means if, when you heard the testimony of Christina and you believed it, you don't need any corroboration to it. So that could be a fact you consider. That means if you heard the testimony of Christina and you believed her when she said that this defendant would always talk about going on a run, when you talk about, you know how to get rid of a body, who says that to his daughter, considering how her mother was found? That's after she says that after Melissa Walkenbarger's remains have been identified. He makes those statements. That's what she remembers growing up. Does that? This defendant. This case went through several detectives. They basically continued to work on this case. Detective Calhoun and Detective Shepard. Even through the retirement of Detective Calhoun, he continued to work with Detective Shepard until the cold case unit was created, and then 3 years later you have this indictment. So from Detective Kelly, when we're talking about this skull is found, to the point where Norma Patton goes to Henry County, and Detective Stott really is the first investigator that starts to really investigate and look for Melissa as a missing person in Henry County. He wasn't able to get a lot of traction with the Atlanta Police Department at that point in '99. We have Detective Stott, who interviewed the defendant. Back during that period, it's before 2003, he says, March, April, '99, last time he saw her alive. You have Detective Calhoun being assigned the case in 2003 when her remains are identified. And then when he retires, you have Detective Shepard, and he works with Stein to do some additional testing. Detective Stott testified that he was one of the first persons to begin the missing persons investigation. And that's when the defendant, when he interviewed him, told him that last time he saw Melissa was in March of '99. And we know that from the subsequent statement in 2021, when he met with Detective Shepard, that's not exactly what he said. He says it was around December of 1998. The only difference between when he makes that statement before 2003, that he saw her in '99 of March, and in 2021 is Melissa's remains have been identified. We know that the remains were located right by his job. And I submit to you that there's a reason why those two statements are consistent. Because he's lying. Detective Calhoun spoke with the defendant. Once the remains were identified, suspected the defendant, once the remains were identified, and also began to look into the history. The first thing they do in homicide investigations, they look at what was the victim's life like. First thing he saw was there's evidence of domestic violence. And what also stood out is the location of where Melissa's remains were found. So we know that from the testimony, Melissa and Chris, the defendant, lived in this area by Brookline Street. We know that Action Labs is right here. And here's the junkyard. So we know that the head was across the street from Action Glass, and we know that the extremities are virtually right next to Action Glass in this wood area. So, make no mistake, everyone's a suspect, but at this point, all of the evidence is pointing in this direction, at this defendant. What is the evidence against this defendant? So there's a timeline of use in this case that was presented. We go back to the beginning of '98. You know the testimony of China Pat is that Melissa started working with her. I think it was a Virginia Highland Waffle House somewhere around the end of '97. So they were working together sometimes on the same shift at the beginning of '98. And there was one point when China remembered seeing marks around the neck of Melissa Wildmark. What she described appeared to show marks of someone's hand around Melissa's neck. Immediately, you know, it was this defendant went out to confront. And that's when he got into the altercation with Troy Clinton. That's what you heard in the testimony to the defendant. That's the beginning of 1998. And we get to July of '98. And so this is what Detective Calhoun is looking at as he's beginning to investigate the case. He's looking at the location of Tremaine and where they lived at, his job, and he's looking at all this information. All the evidence is pointing at this defendant. There's a police report that's created where the officer observes bruising and marks on the person who was Waffenbarger, Melissa. After that, he directs her. The defendant isn't there. He doesn't wait around. After that, he directs her to go report him, take out a protective order, get you some protection from him. And that's exactly what she did. She went down there in person and applied for a protective order. So those are the records that Detective Calhoun had access to. This is a day after July 21st. So the next day, July 22nd, she goes to the courthouse and petitioner seeking relief from family violence. From him. That's who she was seeking relief from. She was seeking relief from the choking that she had and her sister observed, that Troy fought him about. And we had that Rule 9 side setting it down from the 29th, and then we have that where the judge allows her to speak with this defendant. Days after that, days after her hair is being dragged and pulled, days after she's being hit. And then that happens. It wasn't just what Tina said. It wasn't just what Marlon Sutton said about what he observed. There's another person who saw that abuse. Dorothy Jones, Cooley Jones. Dorothy Cooley. She lived in that area. She had known the defendant or before she met Melissa. And remember seeing a day where Melissa had shades on and a black eye. When we talk about testimony of the domestic violence expert about humiliation, isn't that humiliating? Walking around with yet another bruise, another mark, another scratch. Sitting up here talking about skin conditions. That's not a skin condition, that's what I got. You should be offended by them talking about skin conditions and trying to pawn that off as the reasons why people saw marks on her. Tina didn't see a skin condition. These marks in this defendant's hand around her neck, that wasn't a skin condition. That was bruising from being choked. Like I was in a skin condition. He punched her in the eye. It's not a skin condition. All the witness statements line up perfectly on top of each other. The witnesses that observed the abuse during the shooting. This is at the interview. So we go from 10 at the beginning of 1998. We go from Dorothy. We go to July, Officer 7. Then we get to the end of 98, and she's still being abused because she's still going back and forth between Dixon and this defendant. She's still talking about the abuse. This is at the end of the year. Last time he sees her is in December. She's being whooped, intimidated, coerced, bruised, punched, dragged down the street the entire year of 98. And I submit to you, that's not the first year it started. It didn't just start in 98. You can infer that this has been going on for 85, not just 98. Dixon confronted the defendant after he came to the Waffle House at the end of that year. You gotta leave. You gotta go. What did Dixon see? Them talking, Melissa crying. Kind of like that July 29th day at the courthouse. Them talking, Melissa crying. Then we got investigator over here. You heard testimony that from the mother. The DA's office went oh shit. It's his fan. He's hiding for 30, 40 minutes. Come out. He's right here. Let's see the video. There he is. Come on out, buddy. Gig is up. He had 27 years. It's up. Hiding. And doesn't it look like what you saw? Doesn't it look like it was playing? It didn't look like it was his own. It looks like he planned to go there. Got there real quick, went out there, and sat out there for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. Police! Go hide. Guilty. Detective Shepard. Picked up this investigation. Had those same suspicions. Calhoun had all the evidence was pointing to this defendant. But I'm going to interview Chris. See what he has to say. Let's see if this thing is inconsistent. Well, he admits to being fired because the boss thought he stole the salt. Well, that's interesting. Admitted that he borrowed it. That's interesting. He admitted that him and Melissa were having problems. Admitted that Melissa was seeing and staying with a guy named Mike. Admitted that he did not look for his wife. Well, here's the thing. Even if, he still has 2 young children. Very young children. Even if him and Melissa had planned on going their separate ways, wouldn't you think that at some point he'd want to be able to tell his children he looked for their mother? Wouldn't you think that? some point, for his children's sake, he would have tried to look for their mother. That is a fact I think you should consider, because you look at all those pictures of Six Flags. What is he trying to say? He's a good father? No, he's not. He looked for their mother. And you can take your kids to Six Flags every day. That does not take away from the fact that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. One, you should have abused her. You should have intimidated her. You should have punched her. You should have grabbed her and dragged her. You should have murdered her. That's not a good father. And then you had that statement they made, the detective, Detective Shepard, and I want you to hear this. So I'm going to take a moment and play it. I want you to hear this, what he says, those points in particular, what he says about the assault, what he says about his efforts to look for his wife, and what he says about his knowledge that she was going to leave him, the problems that they were having, and the knowledge that she had about Mr. Dixon.
Battery 60%. Connected to DHCPL 5490 GTHC and DHCPL 5400 39F10.
I mean, before that, where was she working? At that time, the Wawa, up in, like, she worked at the little performance. At the glass company around the corner.
All right, so when was the last time you saw Melissa?
And that's the thing, you know, I don't quite remember the last time was, I remember when she would come and go, okay? And we'll say that it wasn't like we're happy-go-lucky. She's sitting right here one day that she was up and gone. And I don't know if that's the way.
So would you describe your relationship as tumultuous or like on again, off again? You know,
it was rocky there towards the end, mainly I think because it was her family so far trying to get back in her head and trying to make her think things and do things. And
like what?
Man, she never had a relationship with her sister at all. You know, and then there towards the end, you know, I guess everybody has a need for one, you know, a family with their love and want that type of thing. You know, and I think there towards the end, maybe she tried a little to try to get back with them or to do or what. But I don't think it was near what they made it seem like, that she was there all the time, or she leaving cards or pictures. And I know that did happen sometimes when she did, you know, at that time, but the trouble that we had a common goal of what we were trying to accomplish. You know, we had several goals in our own,
Which was to go to California.
this is a good way to clear that and all. You know, I remember my mom. She didn't want more than that. She didn't want her to be raised like she was in her hair. There was no, you know, we knew that her hands were bad and that anybody could fill in her hair.
Okay, so when was the last time you saw her?
The last actual time I remember was like, I woke up and she was gone. Like, we were in the middle of the night and she left. And I don't know if that was the last time when I dropped her off the train station to go to work. If it was exact. I don't
Do you remember telling Detective Calhoun that the last time you saw her, you were driving up to your house along Brookline and saw her walking down the street? That was the last time you saw her.
I don't know what to say now, when it's possible.
Okay.
I just don't.
So that, basically you said that was the last time you saw her, that she said she was going to a train station. Something to that effect. I'm not saying verbatim that's what you said, but it's something along those lines.
It's possible. I'll give you that.
But does that sound like it's accurate?
again, I don't know.
Would you remember that incident, or do you recall that happening almost about to be home, driving up and her walking down the road? Does that ring any bells?
I mean, that's usually the way it happens because we only had one girl.
Okay.
You know, if there
She
was,
was walking to the train station to try to go to work or something.
or I get her ride, or she, you know, sometimes she just wanted to walk. You know? We're not talking about the train station far away, we're talking about the real after the end of the road.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the city, so I understand. But talking about that specifically, do you remember that day specifically?
One of the road.
Well, I would like to ask you, what was she wearing? Do you remember? Did she have a purse with her? You know? So you don't, the last time you saw her, when you came back home, she wasn't there. Where was her stuff? She didn't have a car. She couldn't move it, so it was still in the house.
I mean, if she left and just like that, it was only like just a small. I mean, kind of the same thing I did. I mean, when Austin was driving, we moved, their parents was going to sell the house and everything. You know, when I left, I didn't take hard enough to know what was going on. Whatever little.
After the last time you saw her, or that when she left, did you tell her family? Did you tell your family? Did you tell her your wife?
I mean, she had left many times before that. When she would leave to go, I never knew that was the last time I was going to see her. If I did, I would have, you know, freaking kept her.
After a month or two, you could think that was.
You know, after a while, I was thinking that she had split and moved on. I mean, there was, you know, she was maybe seeing the guy and everything that was up there, or I know that she was living with in Buford, or no. I can't remember the last one was Buford or Peachtree Corners.
Was she seeing somebody?
I don't know if she was seeing somebody, but there was this dude, and I want to say his girlfriend, that sometimes that she would stay with him in like an entire lodge out that way. And
how did she know this?
She worked with him.
Was it the girl or was it the guy?
I want to say the guy and the girl both worked there, but I could be wrong. I know the guy worked there, but I know that it was a couple. You know, because then there was one time that they had called me and it said that they were moving and she had to go and do something. You know, she had to do something else.
And this was before the last time you saw her, right?
Well, that's
what I'm saying. I just want to make
all that.
I'm not misunderstanding you. I'm not trying to trick you or confuse you.
No,
I just want you to remember.
I'm trying to figure out.
Like that you were there, I was. So that's why I just want you to be accurate. All right, so year goes by, you still don't tell anybody that she's gone.
I mean, I'm figuring that she's already done. I mean, we were always talking about changing her name and doing all that. She had the stuff there.
Right.
You know, and she got to the point where she was unhappy with me. I'm not trying to put myself in anybody's life that doesn't want me there. I mean, I look at my daughter and everything that's going there. I tried to push. And, you know, maybe looking back at everything now, I was wrong. All the way around with both of them. Maybe I should try to push forward and try to do it.
You said you lost your job back then. Your job, the last one was your job.
Man, this guy, now, there's a lot of things going on out there with that. But, and I do now the same thing pretty much I did then. I mean, I work on local player and everything on the side. And there was a guy there, and I don't know who stole the thing, there was a saw that was missing. And I can tell you the exact guy that I borrowed this tool from and everything to, I didn't steal their saw. Period.
Why did I?
Because he said I stole a saw. Because the saw was missing, and I lived around the corner, and he drove past my house, and he seen the back of the boat player out there at the top, which was cut off.
So he thought you could cut something off the car.
You know, and I flat out said, look, I don't know anything about it. You know, and then there was that, and then there was something where I had drove through the toll plaza thing on 400. You know, there was just a bunch bunch of little things that happened this last year. I think we need to go to the whole fire. You know, there used to be a thing where you can go through it. Right. You know, and I was under the understanding, I was under the understanding that, you know, there's a thing that's painful, or there's just a bunch of little things. And that was just like, there's no deal, there's no. They just let you go. Right. Dead body and so on. Yeah. Well, we had to do it. And you know, if it comes there where I've always thought, I tried to tell them whatever, but I just said, last straw, yeah.
Did you ever go up to the Waffle House and get an altercation with the mail?
I don't remember. I saw that on the internet. I don't remember that.
You guys said you came up there and beat you up.
And it seems like I would remember that, but I don't, you know.
You drive a yellow Volkswagen?
I never had yellow. Right.
It's never yellow.
Never. I've never had yellow. I had a thing that's yellow.
What do you think happened to this?
Man, every which way I think about it, it has to go back. If her parents didn't do it directly, it had to be something indirectly around them. I beat my brain.
So when you found out that a body was found just around the corner from where you were, and that the body has been dismembered with assault,
I didn't know that the body was dismembered with assault at all.
you know the body was dismembered?
I heard that. Nobody ever said assault. I didn't hear about that. Nobody ever gave me an autopsy. I said that to me. I didn't know that it was on the internet. Honest to God. I mean,
So what motive would her family have to kill?
I mean, to me, it's kind of strange that they got away with this stuff for all these years, and then all of a sudden, right, as we split up and doing this right here, and all of a sudden he ended up guilty. I don't know if she came to them needing money, or...
Do you think it's likely that her own family murdered her up and cut her up?
Man, her own family killed her family and friends.
Yeah, I know he committed murder, but that's...
So his family and friends.
Well, why would he kill her? What would be the motive?
Hey, man,
If he's involved in, your family's involved in criminality, and you're trying to protect yourself from going to jail, that's a motive to kill someone. What motive would he have to kill her?
Well, we knew what he did. Her dad was like one of mine.
So you weren't worried about him coming after you? I mean, if he was going to cut up his own daughter and cut you?
How would he come after me? I didn't do anything. I didn't come in. Here's what I'm saying, okay? I don't know if she needed money or if they come to him and threatened him in any kind of way, and, you know, and they did, maybe they were drunk, and it's one thing that I don't know. But anything I say at this point is speculation because I don't know. But I feel like the hell, if they're serial killers that have killed their family and friends and something happens to their family. Okay, first of all,
serial killers operate
let's say what is, okay?
Well, I'm not here to talk about, I'll deal with their family.
Right. What's the facts? Facts. You said that she was put in bags, right? What's the internet that she was in a lot?
I didn't say that.
So was she put in bags?
Well, I didn't say that.
Look, we're being straight with you. I'm trying to help you out. I'm trying to
understand, but what I understand, the body parts had washed out of an area onto the street. Now, there were bags recovered there, so could you make the assumption that they may have been in bags? Yes. But I wasn't there to see, so I can't.
Nobody has been straight up with me on this, okay? And everything that I'm learning is basically through the internet. And we all know how the internet lies, and it's a whole thing.
I agree with you 100%.
Everything that the internet says about me, living under a different name, trying to hide their deadly lies.
That's why I'm not asking you about that, because I'm not going to go off on speculation from the internet.
Throughout the trial, you heard from the testimony of Dr. Rosa James. She was a domestic violence expert. She had hundreds of experiences with persons that have been victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. She was able to tell you about some of the cycle of abuse, talking about the tension building at the beginning of 1998. We talked about the incident, different phases where there's an incident, then there's a reconciliation, and then there's calm. And so ultimately, what we have from the beginning of 1998, when Melissa started working with the sister, we have a representation of what that expert was talking about. We have the tensions, we have the incident, we have the reconciliation, I'll call that July 29th, and then we have the subsequent calm until we have the disappearance of Melissa. And I would submit to you that testimony of the expert, of Dr. James, is relevant testimony. It's testimony you can and should consider in evaluating what's been presented in evidence of domestic violence. And I would ask you to put the appropriate weight on her testimony and use that in your determination. Dr. Mark Gilbo is an anthropologist with a specialization in the skeletal remains and analysis of skeletal remains. He was able to say he observed soul marks on the remains of Melissa Waffenbarger, and as far as exhibits that he was able to go over, exhibit 34, which you'll have, you see the example here where he's talking about the part of the bone that had been shaved down, and you have the next exhibit, the autopsy of the remains of Melissa Waffenbarger. You see where the saw marks are that were indicated by Dr. Gilbo, what he observed. And then you have the ridges here, where it also appears that there's some type of mechanical saw or device that is being used to dismember the remains of Melissa Waffenbarger. I'll submit to you those are facts and evidence along with the fact that this defendant was in possession of the saw, the fact that this defendant borrowed the saw from his job, the fact that this job never got the saw back. Those are all facts to be considered. Those are all logical, common sense deductions to be drawn. Within the testimony of Dr. Cherry, you heard about the analysis and testing, in particular the swabbing of Norma's mouth, the analysis of the dental records, and that ties directly into the additional analysis and tests that Detective Stein did when he got connected with Detective Shepard. And we have that additional testing where, even though it didn't result in anything useful, Detective Stein was able to retrieve the bags and submit them for additional testing. And I submit to you that those bags were outside for who knows how long. I'll submit to you that there was evidence that the head had been moved. I submit to you that George McEachran encountered that bag along with his daughter. I'll submit to you that Tina Miller, Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office, responded to that location along with Detective Kelly and the Atlanta Police Department. And even though that did not result in useful information, the process is important because it's important to cross every T and dot every I. And in this investigation, that's a part of the process, and I submit that to you. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sit down. The defense will have to address you with your arguments. I will submit to you that this case is not about the family of Melissa Waffenbarger. This case is about there's a tumultuous relationship between this defendant and our victim, Melissa. He wasn't able to control her, and when he lost control, he murdered her. That's what the evidence has shown, and at the conclusion of the case, after the judge charges you on the law, when I ask you to vote the truth, and that's guilty on that count of murder, and this is that.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes care of the prosecution's closing statement. Now we're gonna flip. Now we're gonna flip the script. And we're gonna get the defendant's closing argument in this very same case. And as we speak right now, the jury is deliberating in this case. When I get the verdict, you'll get it here in print, or I'll go live one. Either way, you're gonna get the verdict in the case of Georgia versus Christopher Wolfenbarger.
Mr. McDermott, does the defense wish to make a closing statement?
Yes,
Closing
Your Honor.
argument? Thank you.
Just a short word about how this works. The state gets to split their argument. So they'll make an argument, I get to make an argument, they get the last word too. So I get the first word, last word, and I won't get to rebut that. And that's just the way it is. We accept that. You've all taken an oath. And you've taken an oath, and the judge will instruct you in just a minute. Not my words, not their words. The law that will require you to decide this case based on evidence. Based on evidence. You remember in my opening statement, I told you that the state has got gaping holes in this case. And that the state is going to give you bits and pieces of evidence. And it is going to tell you a story to fill those in the way that suits them. And it's going to ask you to imagine along with them that that story is true. And it's going to ask you to make a leap of logic at the end of it. From alleged instances of abuse to murder. And I have asked you to follow your oath, to follow the law, to decide the case based on the evidence, not on imagination. Let's talk about the evidence a little bit. You've been told about the difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. I won't rehearse the story, the lesson. What hard evidence exists in this case? I will submit to you that not one bit of direct evidence in this case points to that man right there. Not one. I'm not saying there's no direct evidence in this case. There's lots of it. There is obviously the remains. There is the manner in which those remains were recovered. We had the head discovered in the street on April 29th. We're not exactly sure how it got there. One detective thinks there was a great rain event that washed it out. Another one says there was a dog. We don't know. And then about a month later or so, they discover several bags in the wooded lot behind the trucking business. Some people call it a junkyard. Come back to that. The medical examiner eventually is able to identify the skull using dental records, dental charts. and notes that there are tool marks, of course, on the body parts. After some time goes by, we also know that there was a search of Christopher's former residence. There was lots of evidence taken from this. Lots of evidence that came from the remains. As we've talked about before, there were paint chips in the hair. There were human hairs, apparently not Melissa's. There were pubic hairs, a pubic hair. There was DNA evidence. There were carpet fibers. There's lots of evidence. And you heard the detectives sit there and tell you, we specifically sent this off for testing. Some of it more than once. Whoever's hair that was in there, it wasn't Melissa's, was also not his. Whoever's pubic hair that was also not his. Wherever those paint chips came from, it was not from his residence. Someone says, oh, it was remodeled. It may have been remodeled, but folks, when you paint over paint, the old paint's still under there. And you go scrape a paint sample, you're going to get all of it. None of it matched. There was luminol evidence. It sprayed the entire house, not a drop. And finally, the more modern DNA taken from the bag. You heard Detective Stein sit there and talk about the event where they went out with all the media to the site, looked at the proximity to where Christopher worked. You heard him testify about the DNA in the bag, and he read the results of those reports. Yes, we found DNA. Yes, there was a viable profile that represented 5 people. Two of whom at least were male. And they submitted Christopher's DNA sample. They went up specifically again to get new DNA from him and submit it for that test. That was in 2022 or so. Christopher willingly submitted. Yeah, he knew the DAs were still investigating it. He didn't run from it when they called him and said, hey, we'd like to get your DNA. And he submits it, and you heard the results of the test. Christopher Wolfenbarger is excluded from being contributed. Well, that's when we hear this theory about there was a great rain flood event. I gave this page from the weather reports. The National Climatic Data Center for the City of Atlanta in April of 1999. I gave it to Detective Shepard. And he saw him pretend he couldn't, or I believe it was Don I gave it to the detective. And you saw him pretend, oh, I'm not comfortable reading this. This document's going to go back with you into evidence. And you all can look at it. And if there's a single one of you who can't figure it out, I would be shocked. The days go down here, the days of the month, the hours of the day go this way, and at the end there's a cumulative total of the rainfall for each day. And you'll be able to look at this document and see that on that day, the other deputy who said there was an intermittent mist was correct. There was roughly a quarter of an inch of rain for the entire day. And most of it appears to have fallen at about 3 o'clock in the morning, long before that had appeared on the road that day. And you can look up the rest of the way, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, Detective Shepard, oh, it rained so much that month. No, it didn't. They analyzed the carpet fibers. They could find no match for sounds. So then we're told about the circumstantial evidence. It's interesting to me that you just heard the district attorney tell you all the facts and evidence in this case point to one man. But he's not talking about this hard evidence, is he? Because there's a bunch of that and not a single bit of it points to this man. All of it points away from this man. But Detective Shepard, or maybe it was Detective Calhoun, one of the two, got on the stand and said, there's only been one suspect in this case from day one. Well, when the results keep pointing away and pointing away and pointing away, maybe there should have been a different. Maybe you should have asked some more questions of the neighbors or of the family. You heard the detective, the district attorney here tell you. That's how we conduct investigations. We look at the person's life. We want to find out what's going on in their life. They never investigated that family. They never investigated anybody else. Where are the records of the test of paint chips for a single other person's house? Where are the records for a search warrant from a single other individual's house? Where are the search warrants getting hair or pubic hair or DNA from anybody else in this investigation? Crickets. Because they want to tell you a story about domestic violence. I'm a supporter of Me Too. Domestic violence is a real thing. You've heard the district attorney tell you multiple times now. This is a case about domestic violence. It may have that question in it somehow. Certainly it does. It is an issue you're going to have to decide. You're going to have to decide how much weight to attribute to those alleged incidents. And you're going to have to decide, as a fact finder and determiner in this case, how it fits into the overall picture. But this is not a case about domestic violence. This is a case in which a man is charged with an act of murder. And the state has not given you one single instance or bit of evidence about an act of murder. They want to get you sympathetically on the board. After he tells you, don't judge this by sympathy. But then he wants to tell you all these violent instances, and he wants to embellish them. He punched her. That's not an evidence anymore. He beat her all the time for the whole year. That's not an evidence anymore. And they want to tell you that story and then ask you to make the leap to there must have been some act of murder also. What about these instances of domestic violence? We heard from first about the July 1998 incident. Yes, there's a police report. We had a police officer testify. He told you he did not look under her clothing. How could he have known if there were scrapes on her back or backside? He told you that. I didn't look at that. We get home and says, well, I got home with her and she had scrapes all down her backside. Just after she had gotten done telling you that she was wearing blue jeans. I'm not sure how you get scrapes if you fall on the ground with blue jeans on. You have reports from Tina. Tina says she came in there with choke marks on her neck. And there was another guy named Clint who stood up for her. None of that story is corroborated by anybody else anywhere. The only person who's ever told that story is Tina Pack. Tina says she took Melissa back up to Krista's house on Brookline and confronted Christopher. Christopher tells Detective Stott in his interview that he didn't like Melissa staying with her sister, because she got her into cigarettes and also was doing meth. Not necessarily that Melissa was doing it, but that he didn't like Melissa around that stuff. Well, I think there would be a confrontation when she brought her up there. We've heard from Mr. Dixon about domestic violence. It is funny to me. You should find it incredible that when he gives an interview in 2003 to the police about Melissa, he does not one time mention abuse, marks on her body, being drugged on the sidewalk, her complaining about her husband. He does not mention it one single time in an hours-long interview. And suddenly, when they find him at the last minute before trial, they find out he's been watching true crime shows about this, and suddenly he remembers this incident where she had bruises and she struggled on the sidewalk. The testimony is not credible from a former Waffle House employee and bank robber, Mr. Dixon. You heard evidence from Miss Cooley, lived across the street. She seemed to be confused about a lot of her facts and details. Testimony was difficult to follow. But she says, oh yeah, I heard screaming and breaking glass over there all the time. There was apparently no glass left in the house at some point. Definitely from that house. Definitely that house where Chris lived. And I know that because that's the house I went in and cleaned. I cleaned all the houses that Mr. Holyfield owned. Who's Mr. Holyfield? Holyfield didn't own that house. You heard testimony from several people. That house was owned by Christopher's parents. Miss Cooley was never in there. I think Miss Cooley's confused as to what she's talking about. Oh, well, I definitely saw a black eye behind the glasses. And then she said a few moments later, I only saw her passing a few times when she was getting in the car to go to the grocery store. Never talked to her, just said hi. Testimony about assault. Oh, he had access to assault zone. Well, their memory seems to be just as cloudy and hazy as a lot of people. This is a 26-year-old case, that's understandable. But I look at the statements that were made, and I see at least 4 different versions of that story that have been told. In the original detectives' reports, they said a saw went missing while Chris worked there. And we thought it was Chris. We blamed Chris. And we never found him. And then later it turned into he stole a saw. And then later they backed off and said, well, no, he asked to borrow a saw. And we never gave it back. You heard them. Their own witness, they had to impeach you by playing things that were in audio because they said they didn't even remember saying that. And they testified here that he took a saw, not saying he stole it, whatever. And she didn't even remember talking to me a couple weeks before that, before trial. She didn't remember telling me on the phone that, yeah, he brought it back. circumstantial evidence about alleged conflicts in Christopher's statement. What conflict did you hear in his statement? Inconsistencies, that was the word. There were inconsistencies in Christopher's interviews. And they play for you the interview with Mr. Stott, 2001, and then they play for you the interview with Detective Shepard in 2021. In one version of those stories, in the 2001 interview, Chris tells that the last time he ever saw Melissa, she was walking down Lee Street by the MART station. And he stopped to pick her up, took her up the road to Taco Bell. It's right by the interstate. And when they were done talking, apparently she talked about wanting to get back together. He said that was too emotional for him at this point, and he dropped her off back at the train station. She left back north. Lee Street, MART station. How far is that from Christopher's house? Because when these new investigators came in 2021 and tried to trip him up with this stuff, all these details from 18 years or 20 years prior, they asked him a specific question. Do you remember telling him the last time you saw her, she was walking down Brookline Street? I'd be a little confused too, because he never said that. Now, whether he remembered the other statement from up Lee Street or not, I don't know. But again, you're 20 years later. Is Christopher the only one in this entire trial that doesn't get a pass on memory? When witness after witnesses stand here and say, I can't remember that, I don't recall. At least the police officers get to carry their report with them and read the details and pretend they remembered it. This business about hiding. Christopher cooperated with police time after time after time. I don't have to list it all tediously again. All the DNA results, the hair, the pubic hair, everything else. Every time they called him and said, we want this, he showed up. They could have showed up at his door that day. He would have walked out to them. They could have arrested him right there. But they chose to use some kind of SWAT team enforcement with unmarked cars, no lights. If you ever see the video again, you will notice when those cars pull up, no lights are on. Later in the video, when they're all up at his house, then they have their lights on. They don't turn it on until later. No marks on those cars. The only marked car was all black with black letters. So if you're viewing that coming up your driveway and armed men get out with M16s, what are you going to do? Walk out and greet them? Look, it was rational to fear that, okay? It's rational to be afraid. Imagine if you're seeing that through a home security video and you can have even less resolution. And so in order to connect their stories about domestic violence, to embellish them, and then create a story that somehow leads to a murder, they bring in domestic violence expert. And she tells us what she tells us, much of which may be valid in certain contexts. And she says, well, if you're leaving, that's a sign of domestic abuse. But if you're returning, We can also explain that as domestic abuse. And if you're at any point in this cycle, virtually any behavior can be explained as part of a cycle of abuse. And Ms. Hilton gave very pointed hypotheticals, clearly designed to apply to this case. And she says, yes, clearly that's domestic abuse. Yes, clearly that's isolating somebody. Yes, clearly that's reconciliation. Yes, yes, yes. No hesitation whatsoever. But when the defense just tweaked the hypothetical just a little bit, her answer was what? Yes? No? No, her answer was, I don't know. I need more facts. I need to know what the abuse situation is. And wait a minute. How can you jump on a hypothetical when she asked it, and when we asked it, we get him hauled around? And it turns out she's a former employee of the DA's office. She's effectively like having an extra prosecutor up there on the stand to hit softballs they throw at her. So what you have happen is you have the state telling you a story that they want you to believe that leads to a murder for which they have no evidence, an act for which they have no evidence, an intent for which they have no evidence, and an unlawful killing for which they have no evidence. And they want you to follow their story to judge something based on no evidence. And all the other evidence in the case that points away from Christopher, every bit of hard evidence in the case that points away from Christopher, they spend their time trying to fight against that. Normally the roles are reversed. Normally the state's putting up the hard evidence and the defense has to say, well, that's not right, this is not right, that doesn't apply. But they wanted to, oh, well, the DNA must have been corrupted because of a rainstorm or whatever. But literally all the evidence points away from Christopher, except for the story. We've been told, or you've been told, that the defense's story, the defense is Carl Patton. We've never said that. And we've certainly never singled out Carl Patton as the only possibility. I want to share something with you that you're also going to hear in a few minutes. And this again is from the law. An interesting thing the DA said a while ago. He said, they're trying to tell you that Carl Patton did this. But the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They haven't given you proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Carl Patton did this. Well, that's not quite how it works. The only person in this room for which the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt applies is the defendant. Any other evidence, you're allowed to determine how you think it may apply, how it may fit in the case. And this is the law that she's going to read to you, not the law he just told you about. This is the law she's going to read to you. Of course, you have to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt. And in a case like this one, where the only evidence against the defendant is circumstantial, our statutes and our courts have determined that this is how you should interpret beyond a reasonable doubt. You would be authorized to convict only if the evidence, whether direct or circumstantial, or both, excludes all reasonable theories of innocence and proves the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, in a case in which there's circumstantial evidence only, you have to exclude every other reasonable possibility. And friends, that's where you do get to use your imagination. I'm not inviting you to come up with Disneyland fairy tales. No, that's vague and arbitrary. That's what the statute outlaws. But if there's any other reasonable possibility to explain the death of Melissa Wolfen murder, then you must acquit. From the evidence you have, the hard evidence you have remains. You know the area she lived in. You know she was going to Doraville. You know she was riding the train. You know she was getting off that train at midnight and walking from the Lee Street station to Brookline or wherever else she went regularly at night, midnight in the West End. We know she was hanging out with people who were drinking a lot. We know that at least, according to some people in the evidence, some of those people were doing drugs. And when drugs and alcohol are involved in anything, the pool of potential suspects is a chasm. I don't have to find one and bring it to you and say, this guy did it, and I can prove it to you beyond reasonable doubt. You just have to be able to understand it could have been anybody, and that's reasonable. And that's where people like Carl Patton do come in, and Norma Patton. The whole thing about the 5 murders and the dumping bodies in the river and the covering it up for many, many years. But we also find out that one of his victims was a drug dealer that Carl worked for. We also find out that he engaged in contract killing. We also find out that there was a member of their family in some common law way whose father Carl had killed. And he didn't find out until sometime later. The same man also hung out in that household, was friends with the Patton family, and later was accused of molesting Melissa. And Norma, and with Melissa's testimony, apparently tried to get him indicted. Does this man have a motive to get revenge against Carl? Yes. Does he have a motive to get revenge against Norma and even Melissa? Yes. Is it reasonable to believe he could have been involved? Absolutely. Is it reasonable to believe that one of her new boyfriends was involved when he found out she had a husband? When he found out or heard a rumor that she was pregnant? Is it reasonably possible that she did find out what her dad had been doing and came to him needing money, came to him with a, I will expose you? Is it possible that living in that area, she got involved in a drug deal gone bad? Why would they dismember her? Dismembering is not, it's not common, but it's not unheard of even in drug deals. It's a way to dispose of a body. It doesn't have to be ritualistic. You don't have to be Jeffrey Dahmer. And in fact, that's what the state's alleging in this case, that it was merely a means of trying to hide a body. What if she owes somebody a drug debt? Here's a possibility. How do you know that she didn't die of an overdose in somebody's house and they had criminality in their house and they panicked and tried to hide the body? Where's your evidence? It just has to be a reasonable theory. That's what law says. You can't rule it out. There's not one of these scenarios you can rule out. And if you can't rule it out, that's a reasonable doubt. Maybe she really was pregnant. Maybe she tried to have an unsafe abortion. Where's your evidence, sir? It just has to be a reasonable fear. If the state had done more investigation, maybe we could have eliminated some of these, but we can't. You can't rule these out. Is it possible that destitute, poor, no hope, she did take her own life, and then somebody found her body and tried to get rid of it? Is it possible? The state has not ruled out any of these. It has told you a story about one possibility. It has embellished some of the details and asked you to imagine that it went all the way to a murder. Here's some random thoughts to consider. The bags were found in the wooded area. We heard testimony from Ms. Miller, the investigator who was there, the one who found the first bag, state that she found it right by a pathway. Now, why did they even start looking back there? She told you. She told you the owner of that trucking company said, why don't you look back behind here, because there's a cut through that people use in a wooded area that drug dealers and other people use. That's what she said. She testified to that. And they go back there and start searching, and lo and behold, the dog actually misses it, but she spots this bag right by the trail. And we saw pictures of several of those bags that she described as being in a clearing or on the trail. Not pushed up under the brush. No attempt to hide these things. Those bags were even either thrown there to be found by somebody, or they were just haphazardly thrown there. But the least likely scenario is that someone was taking care to try to hide it. Did somebody kill Melissa and throw it where it could be found, right where Chris worked, to send a message? You can't rule it out. That's a reasonable doubt. The domestic violence incident expert spoke about that. Have you considered the evidence we've heard about how Melissa was raised? About how she was locked in a room? How she was, according to Ms. Waddell, stunted in her intellectual development? Unsocial? Very easily controlled, naive? Why is it that when she goes to Kathy's house and she says, I want to turn my children over to you, and then she goes to, writes a letter to Norman and says, no, I want to give all the custody and come see you and stay away from her? Why is it that she talks that way to one side and talks a different way to the other side? Maybe she had a power and control relationship with her mother. Maybe the power and control wheel applies in that relationship too. Maybe when she went up to get her from Brookline and helped her file her police report and helped her go file a court protective order, then took her home and helped her took her to Henry County to try to get custody back. Maybe that was exactly what Wendy was telling us. She's easily controlled, and maybe those weren't her own actions. Maybe she was being influenced by the person that used to lock her in a room every day and deprive her and control her. it's interesting that the incident happens in 1998, and all of the things in the power control wheel are suddenly in Melissa and Norma's favor, according to their understanding of how the law works. You remember, I asked her, did you understand that you just go down to the court and say, I want my kids back, and then give your kids back? Now, I know because I'm an attorney and I read the law. Actually, we talked about it there as well in testimony. That's not quite how it works. But Norma testified that that was her understanding, and it was Melissa's understanding at the time. So, what happens? Melissa's with her at that time, not with Chris. Melissa went down and said, I want my kids back. So as far as they understood, they had custody back. They had the physical custody of the kids because they had them at their home at that time for those few days. And they had filed a restraining order against Chris, which would have required him to stay away from them. So according to the power control wheel, everything was in their favor, if that's what Melissa really wanted. If what Norma is telling us in her version of the story is actually true, there would have been no reason to go back to Chris whatsoever. And yet, she goes to her court date and dismisses it. Oh, that's evidence of abuse of power and control. But the power and control was with her mother. She could have easily stood up and said at that time, I'm done. I have everything I want. I don't need you. You can stay away from me. But she didn't. At that moment, she had a choice to go back to Norma Patton or to go back to Chris. And she chose Chris. We're told this sentimental story in Melissa, last time I talked to her, she said she only wanted one Christmas present. Picture of her and her papa. You've heard no evidence in this case that she ever even hung out with her papa. But you have heard evidence in this case that her papa was a blackout drunk who slept on the couch. It doesn't make sense. You've heard evidence that Tina Patton insisted in 2003 interview with Mr. Calvin that she saw Melissa on her birthday in 1999. That was March 20th. She told Calhoun, she emphasized it over and over, I know I saw her. And she said her mother tried to get her to change the story because it didn't line up with her narrative of when Melissa had died. But if she saw her in March 28th of 1999, we know that Chris stopped working at Action Glass at the beginning of February, and he wasn't living there anymore. It's interesting to me that Mr. Calhoun testified that no, Christopher's property was never searched by dogs. They weren't allowed to search. He sat there confidently and told me. Sergeant Lacosta on the stand the next day, and not even from our questioning, from their questioning, volunteered the fact that, yeah, there had been a dog search, and I was there, and yes, they did search the property, and they found nothing. Do you remember Miss Cooley talking about, oh, he built a concrete pad in the back? I bring that evidence in. Except to create an insinuation, oh, he had told somebody allegedly at Waffle House one time about that's how you hide a body. You put it under the foundation of a house and say, well, he don't move the foundation in the back. And, ooh, her torch was underneath there. Well, the dogs didn't find it. So whatever that evidence purpose was, like all the other hard evidence, doesn't point to Chris. Mr. Shepard emphasized to us about the importance of the workplace proximity. This also came up during Mr. Stein's testimony. And it's been emphasized by the DAs over and over again. Showing you the map, showing you the dot on the map where it's at. And right here's Christopher's workplace. You've seen that probably 5 or 10 times. And you've heard testimony about it. And Detective Shepard gets up and drives that point home saying, well, it's more likely that that's where the body was hidden because he didn't have to carry it very far. It's right there. And you heard this testimony about how they went out to the scene, they took the podcasters with them, and they took the media with them, and they took DAs with them, and they had this big publicity stunt about, oh, here's where the head was, and right there is his place of work. I almost expect to hear the dun-dun-dun music in the back. And then you learn about Carl Patton's murders. He killed people in his living room, wrapped them up in a camper out back, and then drove them 30 miles to dump them in a river. Proximity is not proof of who did it. And the medical examiner, Dr. Terry, brilliant Dr. Terry, the one I was afraid to object to her qualification. Brilliant. Fascinating to talk to. Examined Melissa's remains and made a conclusion that supports my argument. Cause of death is undetermined. Well, she said concealment of remains. I think that's a little argumentative. That is a little argumentative. Because she doesn't know if it was bagged for the purpose of concealing or just disposing or just transporting to others. She doesn't know the intent of the person who bagged it. She can't testify to that. But there was decomposition, true, and there was incomplete discovery of the remains. And her conclusion is, I can't determine how she died. And Mr. Fawcett asked her a series of questions. Can you tell if it was strangulation? Can you tell if it was stabbing? No. Can you tell if it was shooting? No. Can you tell if it was poisoning? No. And I want you to interpret what that really means, what they're really saying. Can you determine if she was stabbed to death? No. What that sentence really means is we have no evidence she was stabbed. Can you determine if she was poisoned? No. What that evidence really means is we have no evidence she was poisoned. Can you determine if she was beaten to death? No. We have no evidence she was beaten to death. You have no evidence of a murderous act. You have no evidence of malice being formed, whether in an instant or at some point before. You have no evidence of murderous intent. Well, but it was very likely unnatural. I can authoritatively say that as a medical examiner. This was definitely not a natural death. Very likely not a natural death. You don't need to be a medical examiner to figure that out. Although there are all the scenarios I gave you that you can't rule out, such as a about post-mortem injuries. You don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You may have a suspicion that Christopher did it. That's not enough. You may have a strong suspicion that Christopher did it. That is not enough. You may gravely suspect that Christopher did it. And the judge is going to read you a law here in a minute that says that grave suspicion is not sufficient. You need proof beyond any reasonable doubt that excludes every reasonable alternative. The state's theory is asking you to do a couple of things, and I'm winding up. The first thing it asks you is to ignore all the physical evidence and just listen to our story about domestic abuse. And in doing that, it's asking you to believe that that man right there is so brilliant, he can pull off a mastermind murder. He didn't leave a shred of DNA. He didn't leave a shred of carpet fiber, hair fiber, pubic hair. He didn't leave a shred of anything that our most powerful forensic machines can pick up. Not one shred. And then was dumb enough to dump the body right by where he was. That doesn't make sense. Melissa was surrounded by criminals, violent criminals, drug users, drug dealers, a dangerous area of town. You heard Miss Rock say, I would not walk the streets there at night by myself. She was beset everywhere she went by those dangers. And yet the state is asking you to believe what they're calling an abuser must necessarily become a murderer. But at the same time, that people we know are murderous somehow turn into angels. You can't believe both those things. And I would ask you not to follow your imagination on either one. Don't let the state force you to follow its story, which is imagination. Demand evidence that a murder happened, that an act of murder happened. Demand proof beyond a reasonable doubt that an act happened, that there was intent formed, that the killing was indeed unlawful, and that it was with malice aforethought. And when you get done deliberating, we ask you to return a verdict not guilty.
Thank you.
And that concludes the closing arguments in the Georgia versus Wolfenberger case. Before I go to the verdict, which yes, there is a verdict in that case, I want to quickly get to day one of Florida versus Adelson, and then we're going to wrap this up. State says Adelson offered jail daughter money and drugs to lie under oath. Alright, it's day one of a murder trial. Prosecutors painted Donna Adelson as a manipulative mastermind who not only arranged Dan Markel's 2014 killing, but also tried to bribe fellow inmates to testify falsely in her defense. In her opening statement, Assistant State Attorney Sarah Catherine Dugan told jurors that, according to law enforcement, Adelson urged a fellow inmate she allegedly referred to as her jail daughter to provide false testimony on her behalf. At one point, Dugan told the jury that, according to law enforcement, Adelson implored a fellow inmate to provide false testimony on her behalf. Donna apparently referred to the woman as her jail daughter. The unnamed jailhouse informant, however, snitched. She told authorities that Adelson had offered multiple women at the jail bribes, such as money, housing, veneers, and prescription drugs if they'd be willing to testify under oath. That Catherine Magbanua told them a completely different story about the crime than the one she would be testifying to. Magbanua is one of 4 people in prison for the murder of Markell, an FSU law professor and former son-in-law of Adelson. Magbanua, who is set to serve as a witness for the prosecution, is expected to testify that she was the link between the Adelson family and the hitman who gunned Markell down in his garage. Dugan displayed a handwritten note on the courtroom monitor that one of the informants brought to law enforcement. She said it was a script written by Adelson for a question and answer session that was to take place at trial. Adelson was making plans for the informant to serve as a witness and was apparently telling her what to say when called to the stand. Donna wanted the informant to memorize that script and commit perjury by reciting it on the witness stand. Dugan did not identify the women Adelson allegedly tried to bribe. However, the details are similar to the events that transpired during a last-minute hearing back in February. At that impromptu hearing, Adelson testified that 2 fellow inmates told they had spoken to Magbanua, who said that she was going to set up the Adelsons in exchange for a reduced sentence. According to Donna, Magbanua also said, "Wait until I come back. I'm going to take care of that family. Wait until they see what they're going to get, and I'm going to get a reduced sentence." Donna also told the court that that February hearing that one of the women informed her that Magbanua confided in her that her plan worked. She'd be sitting pretty in Hawaii drinking a fancy drink. At that hearing, the defense made a request which was ultimately denied. They wanted the 2 women deposed rather than a trial because they feared they would be unreachable once the case got underway. Whether the jailhouse informants will be called to testify has yet to be seen, and it is not yet clear if the jail daughter and other women who reported being offered bribes are the same women Adelson was referring to back in February. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, this case is just getting started. This trial is just getting underway. I will keep you informed in the community section and whenever I go live on here, whether it be the midweek bite, final word, Saturday bite, Saturday night's main event. I'll be sure to keep you updated here at Bethea'S Byte Reloaded. And now, to wrap this whole thing up, we have a verdict in Georgia versus Wolfenbarger. We're going to take you inside the courtroom right now.
President County for you are.
Thank you all. Please be seated. Will the foreperson please stand? Good afternoon, sir. My understanding is that the jury has reached a verdict?
Yes, the jury has reached a verdict.
Okay, and was that verdict unanimous?
Yes.
Okay, and has the verdict been filled in, signed, and dated by you as the foreperson?
Yes.
Okay, will you please hand it to the deputy? And you may have a seat, sir.
Sorry about that.
Will the defendant please rise? In the Superior Court of Fulton County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Christopher Wolfenbarger, case number 24SC004201. Count 1, we the jury find the defendant not guilty. This 22nd day of August 2025. Will the state and defense counsel please come up and look at the verdict form and confirm that you have no objection to the form or legality of the verdict? Thank you. Counsel for the state, counsel for the defense, is there any reason that I cannot release the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Members of the jury, I'm going to take just a quick moment to thank you for your time and for your attention to this process. It was a long 2 weeks, but I appreciate that you were here each day ready to pay attention and to do your job. Thank you very much for deliberating, for being here, and for being willing to serve as a juror to your fellow citizens.
So there we go. After 2 weeks of testimony and 2 hours, 12 minutes of deliberation, a Georgia man has been acquitted in the cold case murder of his wife, who was the daughter of a convicted serial killer. Christopher Wolfenbarger was arrested in August 2024 for the murder of Melissa Wolfenbarger. Her remains, including her severed head, were found in trash bags in April and June of 1999. At the time, her remains were misidentified and weren't positively identified until 2003, according to Atlanta police. Melissa disappeared in late 1998. At the time, Christopher claimed she left on her own accord and never returned. According to court documents obtained by Court TV, he told investigators he never reported her missing because he assumed she had moved on with her life. Prosecutors said Melissa had filed a temporary protective order against Christopher in July of '98. And she intended to leave him. At a press conference announcing his arrest, authorities said Christopher was always a person of interest, but did not detail what led to his arrest decades later. Court documents state Melissa's remains were found directly across the street from where Christopher worked at the time. A grand jury had indicted Christopher on charges of murder and felony murder. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Wolfenbarger found not guilty of murdering his wife Melissa. And there's one thing I can say for certain. When a verdict goes down in courtrooms across the country, you can sure bet that once you hear the words guilty or not guilty, a jury will have the final say, but you can also count that the truth will reign. I'm Ernest Bethea, the Last Outlaw. Thank you so much for joining me here on The Final Word. Let's do this again come next week, same time, same place on a Friday. In fact, I don't want anybody to forget. Tomorrow night, on Saturday night's main event, we are gonna sit down. We are going to discuss. We are going to debate whether it's catch this fade or catch these hands. We're going to debate the ethics of intervention. The fight that took place after the Jason Aldean concert, and the 5 women that were involved, and the husband that stepped in to defend his wife. Was he just a woman beater who couldn't wait to put his hands on women? Or was he doing what a husband's supposed to do and defend his wife? Remember, I want your honest commentary. I want your honest commentary. So you can email me. You can email me. You can drop me your thoughts in the comment section of this video in the community or in the community page. But if you prefer to email me, here you go. You can hit me up at kingofhearts316_09 at outlook.com, and in the subject line, SNME 5v1, husband fight or not. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. In fact, I look forward to reading your responses as we go live during this debate, because this is one I definitely want to hear from you on. All right, I look forward to seeing you and hearing from you tomorrow night, Saturday night's main event. 8 in the East, 5 in the West. Let's get at this one, all right? Again, Ernest Bethea, The Last Outlaw. Remember where the heck you were. The drama-free true crime destination. Your home for true crime news without the drama. Where your opinions matter. The lively debates are encouraged, just like tomorrow night. Where your voice will be heard, like tomorrow night. And above all else, justice served. We serve it up with no gimmicks, no drama, no BS. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bethea'S Byte, and it's reloaded. I look forward to seeing you. Until tomorrow night, you know what to do.
Thank you all for joining me here at the drama-free true crime destination. Be sure to follow Bethea'S Byte Reloaded all over social media and get your coverage of true crime news with no gimmicks, no drama, and no BS. This is Bethea'S Byte, and it's reloaded.